Good afternoon. My name is Gabriel Sterling, Voting System Implementation Manager for the state of Georgia. I'm learning how to say that faster. Fit it in. All right, so some details where we stand right now. As the Secretary pointed out, as of this time of day, we are close to 800,000 votes. But as of this morning, we have a total of 714,255 votes. That's really as of about 7 this morning. So absentee by mail, the counties have accepted 378,560 votes. Early vote is 335,695 votes, and that's in 2 days. So it's a pretty steady clip. The amount of ballots still outstanding by mail is 846,443. And just an update on our online ballot requests, we are at 439,095 with about 9,655 still on the dashboard to be accepted by the counties. Now, to put that in some perspective, in the entire election, for the general election, we had a little over 411,000, I believe, requests that came through the online portal. So we are still at a strong majority of the new requests coming through that online ballot portal, which has the added security of a driver's license number as the unique identifier and takes away the possibility of user error and input error at the county level. So those are the basics we have on there today. I'm ready to take any questions y'all might have about where we stand. Yeah, Mark. No, because they don't exist yet. The main thing is it will be conducted based on a mathematical sampling that will be randomized, and we're trying to decide what is the proper level of confidence to get to with the manpower and time and money and bodies available to do it. So we're working on the final details of that, but that'll be decided by people who are, university smart people, not necessarily, us. So. Well, one of the big things we're trying to do is one of the large aspects that was said was that signature verification didn't happen, so we've obviously opened that process up. To an even greater degree, we sent out an official election bulletin to the counties to remind them that all election processes, all of them, are viewable to the public. So we've already seen many counties kind of step up their ability to make that easily accessible. Like Muskogee County, I know they basically moved it from a small back room to their lobby so that people can come in and watch that process. I know that's being taken advantage of. I know that both Republican and Democrat parties have sent monitors to act as public viewers to watch those systems. And I do know that some of the people who are the official election board members, Republican and Democrat, are getting a little more engaged this time. So hopefully those steps in and of themselves and the steps of the press to go report on the fact that these things are happening will help restore people's faith in that. However, outcomes being what outcomes can be in this state. And again, I will reiterate, right now we're having the Republicans basically say this might have been stolen. Let's remember, in 2018, it was Stacey Abrams who still hasn't conceded, and who still is claiming that there were voter suppression the cost of the race. In 2016, there's still polling that shows a majority of Democrats believe that Russians hacked voting machines and switched votes. There's no evidence for that either. So given the state of affairs right now and the ability for people to want to believe what they want to believe, I anticipate we will probably see similar items, barring there being a blowout election. But if there's a blowout election, then I think we'll have people saying, well, obviously it was stolen. It was a blowout election. We have close elections in this state. So no matter what direction you go, that's going to happen. Emil.
As far as the signature audit process, that's obviously open to interpretation because it's the human element of the panel. How much do you factor that in when doing the audit as far as the accuracy?
Well, it's going to have to be a two-part thing because at the end of the day, yes, use the signature, but the point of verifying the signatures is to make sure the proper human being, the proper registered voter casts that ballot. So if we get to a point where you have both the individual team looking at them and they say, we're not really sure about this, let's kick it up a notch, make sure we all agree this isn't one, there's a next step. You have to go find that voter. Did you do this? Because the signature matched, but the voter still voted, it doesn't show an inherent issue in the system, but it does show that having that subjectivity is what leads to the potential for people to ask questions, which is why the Secretary is so intent on moving to a voter ID, more binary thing that's a specific identifier for different voters. So that will take that subjectivity away. And people are saying it makes it harder to vote, but most of the studies we've seen where you've used voter ID, it hasn't done that. And I think we're at a point where we can probably leverage technology to make that easier for all voters. Doug. They can't weigh in. They cannot weigh in at all on what they're doing. There's no item within the law that says, "Hey, I'm a citizen and I object to you matching that signature." There's no possibility for that, and we have a push and a pull with this. It has to be a public process. At the same time, under state law, there's personal identifying information on the eNet voter registration screen, and that has to be protected at the same time. So it is a push and a pull, and it's not they can sit there and examine them and look over their shoulders directly at the screen and do those kinds. They can take a step back and see, yes, this process is occurring. Yes, I'm watching them do that process and I'm seeing it happen, but it's not a question of being able to say, I don't agree with that signature or that signature. So it's an open process, the same way when they're running things through scanners and they're doing an adjudication panel, but there's a little more oversight there because there's a Republican, Democrat, and and an elections worker. And again, this wasn't an issue for the last 15 years of doing this. Our counties are squealing because it used to be this backroom process they could do and easily move forward. Now that it's public, they don't mind it being public. It's just a pain in the butt. Because in order to get this stuff out there and make it easily accessible, especially in a time of COVID, we're having the same issue with monitors. Like at the Buckhead Library, they were trying to do, I believe Buckhead Library is at Fulton, I know this, they were doing one monitor at a time regardless of party. And we're like, guys, you can't do that. I know it's COVID. We know you have to manage these things, but manage it smartly. Make them wear masks. Make them as distant as best they can. But the law is the law and the rules are the rules. So there's no perfect way to do this, but the counties are doing their best to make this a much more open process. And just by having it more open, maybe counties, but some people who were worried about it, will be more conscientious. Well, I can see you have a follow-up. You took your mask off. I expect them to have the feeling that they might need to do that more. But I think most of our county workers and most of the elections workers, they're doing their job, and I think they're doing it as well as they can. Does this add an extra layer where it's the extra belt and suspenders, and maybe I really ought to make sure this is right, and maybe it might do that in a human nature way? I'm sure that's what it's going to be, so that's not a bad thing. Yes. Hey.
Two-part question. So first about signature verification. You know, the Secretary of State's office said a few weeks back that the GBI would actually be assisting with the signature verification process. The GBI says they do not offer a signature verification service. So what experts will be actually looking at these signatures?
Well, I can send this to you. They've actually come in and done training for us. I think there's a slight disconnect that they don't have. We don't go out and do this for other people, but they have people internally who do that, who have been trained on parts of those things, as I understand it. We do have that the training they gave to us. We can forward you the training they gave us at the last Gabriel conference. They are coming in. They are part of the Cobb County investigation. It's partially manpower, but partially having people there who understand what they're doing on those kind of fronts. And like the Secretary said, it's going to take hundreds of man hours. The plan right now is to have 20 teams of two, not 2 teams of 20, 20 teams of 2 operating on likely a 12-hour shift when they do it. We're coordinating. This is what I love about people like, oh, a signature verification process, an audit, that's going to be so easy. No, it's not. It's going to take a lot of coordination. We're sitting there having to figure out how we're going to pay for meals, who's going to bring them in, who's going to shift these guys out, how do we track all this stuff? And it's a system of putting it all together. So we're going through that process right now. For the larger one with the University of Georgia, they're going to be looking through the same process and figuring out what are the rules and how do we put it together. That's why we don't have an exact timeline yet, because we just finished basically. We didn't ink the deal, but we basically have an agreement in principle to have that happen. So the GBI, along with SOS investigators, will be leading that, and I don't direct GBI resources. I'm assuming that they have people there who do have an understanding of basic human ability to recognize that this is the right signature and this is the wrong signature. Go ahead. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the Electoral College is open.
Mm-hmm.
My question is this: if there were calls for this process, this signature verification audit, several weeks ago, why wasn't this process put into place and this signature verification audit done sooner?
Because, frankly, there's been no investigatory rationale for it. At this point, it has become such a drumbeat of disinformation, we now feel obligated to restore confidence in the process by doing it now. Doing it earlier, again, who would have done it? How is it going to be paid for? Since then, the governor and the speaker have both said they would allocate additional resources. We're going to hopefully have that available to us. And frankly, you say earlier, we're really only like, 5.5 weeks away from the election? I mean, so and nobody started attacking the integrity of the election until about 8 or 9 days after that, and nobody started talking about signature verification until about 5 or 6 days after that. So it feels like a really long time, but it really hasn't been. And this is in response to the tsunami of disinformation Secretary Raffensperger said in order to attempt to restore the confidence of some level of people, because, as he said, there are people who are going to go to their graves feeling like this election was stolen, regardless of how much evidence they see. And they're the same way there's been people who go to their graves knowing the Russians gave President Trump this election in 2016. We can't overcome the social media, media outlets, and people doing a willing suspension of disbelief to say, regardless of what I see, that's the same way we were talking about the State Farm videos. When I say, I've watched the entire video. We are working right now to get the website finished up, which I think we're finally there. We found a way to get it set on Vimeo so we can easily get it to people's PCs. I watched the whole video. People say, well, I watched that 90-second video. Are you going to tell me to not believe my lying eyes? And I'm like, given the facts out of context, your eyes aren't lying about that 190-second portion. Yes, they did pull out ballots from that section, but we also an hour earlier saw them put them in. So if you see that, you get some context to it. So we're trying to get as much factual, full information out there as we can, but it's very difficult to combat the President of the United States and his legal team who continue to do things, and then we have elected officials who continue to give forum to these. And it's unfortunate. I believe there's a Senate hearing going on right now. And I was happy to hear that Chris Krebs said that Georgia did it right. We did three counts and showed that our machines did it right, that we are not connected to the internet. There were no votes flipped. So we feel confident that at the end of the day, when historical reference goes through and sees we've been trying to be as open and transparent and as full-throated, we've looked for everything we can. We are continuing investigations. Yes, there are going to be out-of-state voters. I mean, there's going to be illegal voters, but not a widespread Dominion-based Venezuelan Hugo Chavez ghost coming out to do this. And it's difficult because I know and love and am friends with a lot of people who are Trump voters who think that right now I'm not telling the truth, and it's hard. But we're going to continue to tell those hard truths to every voter so that when the next time when the Democrat loses in this state and they feel wronged, that they can have the confidence, hopefully, and the next time the Republican loses after that, because guess what? They win and lose all the time. It happens. So and especially in a state like this, and as the Secretary pointed out, a large percentage of Republican voters split their tickets. You can look at particular counties. Fulton County alone was 9,000 votes more for Senator Perdue than it was for President Trump. 20,000 people skipped the election altogether. They skipped the president. The biggest election on the ballot, they just skipped it. So, because at some level, internally, they made that decision. That's their right to do that. But it's hard for people who are strong, hardcore partisans of either party to understand that kind of maneuver. So that's why it's being done now. I wish we didn't have to do it because there's no specific allegation of wrongdoing other than we feel like something bad happened there, and we know, because this is true, the most likely place you're going to see illegal votes is going to be through the absentee ballot process because 75% of our votes were cast in person with a voter ID right then and there. Yes, sir. At this point, I think we all say that. Mm-hmm. Given the set of circumstances of the time, no. And I've been asked this question over and over again, so I'll say this again. If it comes up on a ballot again, God gave us primaries for a reason. Yes. Mm-hmm. We offered to do that in part, and as I understand, there might be a separate hearing, but I'm out of those discussions, so don't look to me for information on that. It would go to our Deputy Secretary. Our lawyers said, as we were about to go into hearings on these things, if we went in with our specific responses and the way we would do it, would put us at a legal disadvantage in the situation. So the attorneys, which is the Attorney General's office, the Special Assistant Attorneys Generals, and our General Counsel all said, don't go testify. In retrospect, maybe put the legal things aside, but at the same time, in general, I've got a habit in my life. When lawyers tell me to do something when I'm in litigation, I tend to listen to them. So does the Secretary. It's generally a good thing to do, but sometimes the legal best thing to do and the political best thing to do may not mesh, and I think that might have been the case here, and I'm sorry that happened, but we always stand ready to answer their questions. They've sent us written questions. We've answered those. Like you said, I have no shame and no doubt that I will go try to answer every single question that ever gets asked of us as best that we can, and we will continue to do so. Yeah. No. Yeah.
Would there be a circumstance where you would do an audit or not?
I don't know.
Okay. Separately, back on signature match, we have a state senator who apparently signed an incorrect signature just to see if he could
Get it through?
And he did. Does that show the signature match doesn't work?
It shows it might not work in a particular case, and we've tracked it down. I don't know what other signatures they have besides his driver's license there. His driver's license is very clearly not the same one. But as you know, counties, and we've called Mandy in Forsyth County about this, and I haven't gotten the response yet. He could have a different signature on there, but I think he was probably deliberately trying to get it through, so they may not have. And guess what? As I said, numerous times, human beings are the weakest part of this process. And there's a reason we want to move away from signature match as the way to identify voters, because it's a subjective binary thing. And sometimes I'm sure people are just tired and they want to go through and they probably, oh, I know him and I know he's going to do this kind of thing, so we're going to get it, let's send it through anyway, which is probably not the brightest thing in the world necessarily. Or they have a signature that's similar to that. Or they looked at the wrong signature that was similar to it from anyone next door to it, because his last name is kind of unique, and they kind of know who those people are. I mean, that's he is a sitting state senator. They'd probably recognize it. So I don't have a good way to know that answer yet. We've asked Foresight if they had other signatures they were looking at. But again, the whole point of this is that a binary system whereby you can use a voter identification is the first step, which like 75% have for the request this time. We are in better shape doing it that way for the whole process, to take away that ambiguity and take away people's fears that this could be abused. That it, y'all? All right. Well, thank you all very much. Hope you have a dry, warmer Wednesday than we had so far today. Appreciate it.